Today we'll be reading The Tale of Chamma from the Tales of the Jedi Companion by George R. Strayton. The Tale of Chamma. Over the millennia, many Jedi have fallen either to the dark side or to their own fears, losing themselves in corruption or paralyzing suspicion. Only a few of these lost Jedi ever returned to the light. 400 years before the Freedon uprising, a young, eager Jedi named Chamma undertook his first mission as a full-fledged member of the Jedi Knights. He and his two companions journeyed to Loro Babis, an uninhabited binary star system consisting of 3 planets. A distress beacon from a trade ship aligned with the Republic had emitted an emergency message asking for assistance on Athos, the second planet of the Loro Babis system, and the Jedi had accepted the charge of providing help to the endangered vessel. Chamma and his task force arrived in system to find no ship, just a scattering of ionized debris orbiting the planet in an amorphous cloud. Scanners detected signs of life on the world below, and the Jedi decided to touch down on the surface and investigate. Under the star-spangled deep violet of an Athos night, Chamma set down the bastion in an open field of green rough grass. The 3 Jedi emerged from the ship and used the Force to locate the life forms they had detected from orbit. At the edge of the field stood a forest of broad, deciduous trees, and they all concurred that the sensations of life emanated from somewhere within that wood. As they progressed through the forest, the life signs they were pursuing suddenly split into 3 distinct entities, each moving off in a different direction. After a brief discussion, the Jedi decided to each follow one of the life forms. Just short of an hour later, Chamma found himself deep in the wood, surrounded by thick vegetation and stagnant, saturated air. As he began to wonder whether he should head back, since he felt he was getting no closer to his quarry, he slipped in muck and barely saved himself from sprawling headlong into a dark pond. Splatters of mud hit the water's placid surface, sending concentric ripples of dissonance in all directions, and then Channa's internal alarms panged wildly, warning him of a danger his other senses could not yet detect. He spun around and ignited his lightsaber, bringing the brilliant violet blade into a defensive position in front of him just as its attacking counterpart swung downward. The beams of light collided in a loud crackle hiss, neither yielding to the strength of the other. Chamma squinted against the harsh glare of the frenzied energy emanating from the blade's contact point. He strained to see past the pressing lightsaber, but the darker-than-night sky shrouded his enemy. Even the meager illumination shed by the lightsabers seemed to be repelled from the shadowed stalker, leaving Chamma with no conception of the being's nature other than his impressive stature and strength. With the initial shock of the sudden attack now subsiding, Chamma regained enough of his composure to turn to the Force. But as he focused on his enemy, a backlash of darkness swept over him, knocking him backward. The sharp splash of water sliced through the thick humidity as Chamma landed in the shallow edge of the pond, suddenly bereft of the wind in his lungs. As he struggled for air, a shadowy form, visible only because it was twice as black as the surrounding darkness, appeared at his feet. Wispy tendrils of whatever shadow matter the creature was composed of danced as if possessed, making Chamma wonder whether the being was corporeal at all. The spawn of the dark side, because it could not be called anything else, towered over Chamma for the briefest of moments, although to Chamma it seemed like an expanse of time longer than his entire life. Suddenly, the thing raised its orange-white lightsaber with 2 hands and held it above and to the right of its head. Still lying in the muck, afraid for his life, Chamma shakily brought his lightsaber up. He was confused. Why had the Force not protected him? Did it pick and choose its allies and then turn on them in their moment of need? Was that the true nature of this energy field to which the Jedi Masters had offered up their lives? His anger swelled, attempting to replace his fear. With his adversary's blade swooping down upon him, the answers to those questions did not matter. If he was going to save himself, he had to do it on his own, without the Force. Summoning all his energy, Chamma rolled sideways, splashing water and muck everywhere. The creature's blade struck the pond where Chamma had been, sending up a spray of steam that dissipated slowly into the already saturated air. Chamma leaped to his feet and slashed at the enemy in a wide arc, focusing his gathered energy on the attack. His adversary countered easily, as if he had anticipated the strike moments before. Chamma felt his grasp on hope start to slip, This dark side being held more power than Chamma could even conceive of, and it was well aware of that fact. If the Force had not betrayed him, Chamma thought as he readied his lightsaber for another attack, he would have at least had a chance. He had spent so much of his life trying to understand the Jedi way, trying to become one with the Force, to consider it his ally, and after all that, after all the trials he had overcome. The creature returned his blade to a ready position, neither defensive nor offensive, as if taunting Chamma, telling him without words that the young Jedi's efforts would prove fruitless. At the moment, Chamma felt his entire body tighten and release, forcing adrenaline into his limbs, augmenting them with a strength he did not know he possessed. With a guttural growl of escaping rage, Chamma rushed forward a full step and swung his lightsaber horizontally toward the left side of his enemy's torso. As before, the creature moved to deflect the blow, but this time Chamma turned off his lightsaber, and the creature's own blade swept by with a warped hum. Chamma reignited his lightsaber with the hilt no more than a half-meter from the dark side creature's chest. The lance of violet light extended forward with its telltale thrum of energy, piercing the shadow thing's black heart. The creature wailed, a horrible, grating cry that echoed through the forest, and then it was gone. All that remained to convince Chamma it had existed at all was the dormant hilt of its lightsaber lying on the muddy shore. Chamma did not return with his Jedi companions. He believed the Force had failed him, had turned him away in his first true test. Something else, his own rage, he had decided, had saved him. Did it not make sense to ally with that which would come to your aid when you called? Slowly, over 100 years, Chamma turned his thoughts completely inward, expecting nothing from and offering nothing to anything outside of himself. He maintained a residence on the barren world of Hrath, and never ventured farther than the nearest space station. One morning, Chamma awoke to find a stranger standing in the middle of the living area of his squat adobe residence.
"I have come to return you to the light,"
the unexpected near-human said. His eyes were pools of cloudy white, pupilless, and he seemed to stare off as if he could not see. Chamma gathered his robes around him, fighting the chill of the morning air, and maneuvered toward the table where his lightsaber lay.
"You do not need that, Chamma. We have no dispute. You need only listen, and then I will take my leave."
Chamma scooped the lightsaber from the table, saying, "Do not tell me what I do or do not need, stranger. Now leave before I am forced to remove you." The stranger, a mere Lucan Jedi, obeyed Chamma's wishes, but he returned the next day, and the day after that, until Chamma gave in and allowed him to speak. The Jedi, who gave his name as Noab Hulis, told a story of a young Jedi Knight who had encountered a Sith devotee, a fallen Jedi who had mastered the ways of the Sith and the dark side. This Sith creature, along with 2 others who had escaped during the fall of the Sith Empire, lured 3 Jedi to a remote world, hoping to begin a new sect of Sith fanatics. The 3 Jedi were young and eager, but they lacked the experience necessary to survive an encounter with such beings. Delving into his century-old suppressed memories, Chamma realized then that Hulis spoke of him and his Jedi companions, and the events of that night on Hrath, 100 years ago, that he longed, had tried all his life, to forget. Noab Hulis continued his tale. The Sith separated the trio and assaulted each with waves of darkside energy, momentarily disconnecting them from the Force, allowing fear, anger, and hatred to overcome them. Miraculously, the youngest of the 3 Jedi defeated one of the Sith beings, and the 2 other Darksiders fled, fearing that these Guardians of the Light were more powerful than they had expected. When Chamma realized that the Force had not betrayed him, that the power of the dark side, of his own fears and hatred, had cut him off from the light, he broke into tears. It was he who had done the betraying. It was he who had abandoned the Force. Eventually, Chamma returned to the Jedi Training Center on Ossus, and studied the Jedi Way for several more decades. He became a Jedi Master and relocated to Wrath, where he could be reminded of his own failings while training young Jedi apprentices and teaching them of the trials they would have to overcome. One of his students was Ander Sunrider, whom he eventually sent to Master Thon for further instruction. I hope you've enjoyed this reading of The Tale of Chamma.